Hello there, this video will cover the GUI and command line methods for backing up Linux on a Chromebook as well as cloning a container. The extreme efficiency of the ChromeOS virtual environments, oftentimes resources permitting, will allow one or more desktops or distros to run at the same time. This is a Media Blitz format that will allow me to share topics faster and keep pace with frequently updated topics. My channel focuses on adding the power of Linux to your Android, Chromebook, or PC without the need to root or remove your system. Additionally, I cover cross-platform topics. My playlists are available from the homepage on my YouTube channel and are organized by operating system and cross-platform topics. To make it easier to follow along with my videos, I include the full written instructions in the pinned comment. So if you scroll down to the comments of the current video you are watching now, you will see the top pinned comment containing the written instructions. To see the whole comment, click on Read More. Any updates will be noted at the top of the pinned comment. Note that you can copy and paste the notes into a text file like I have here with the mousepad text editor. Or, if you're feeling fancy, we can copy and paste the notes into a TiddlyWiki notebook, also known as Flexible Offline Searchable Notes. Here, I pressed the backtick key from the top left of the keyboard so that there are 3 backticks before and after the text. This will apply monospaced block formatting. Keep in mind that you can modify the notes however you'd like, whether that's formatting, adding images, or changing what's in the notes. For more information on TiddlyWiki, I recommend watching my TiddlyWiki videos. That concludes the intro, now onward to the video. To back up Linux through the GUI method, we can first open the terminal app. Then from the top right, we can click on Developer Settings. From Developer Settings, we can click on Backup and Restore. Now to back up Linux, we can click on the Backup button. From here we can choose where to save the backup as well as set the file name. Keep in mind the backup can be saved to our Chromebook or to external storage. If you are using external storage, it can be helpful if the external storage has a blinking light. For my example, I am going to save my backup to external storage and I'm going to prefix the already existing file name with something meaningful. Since I only have a base container, I will be prefixing the file name with base container. When we are done setting that up, we can click on the Save button. Now to monitor the progress of our backup, we can click on the notifications from the bottom shelf on our Chromebook. Now if the backup appears to be stuck at the last few seconds, we can click on the notifications from the bottom right twice. And here we should see the new notification that says the backup has been completed. Now if the backup fails due to there not being enough storage, or if the backup error was not descriptive, then we can check to see how much storage we have on either the Chromebook or the external storage, depending on where we tried to save the backup file. To do that, we can open up the ChromeOS Files app. Then to check to see how much storage we have left on the Chromebook, we can click on the 3-dot menu from the top right. And from the bottom of the menu, we should see the amount of storage left over. If the Chromebook's storage is nearly full, then we can check to see if any of the storage is being taken up by trash. To do that, we can select trash from the bottom of the list on the left side, and from here we can see if there's any files in our trash. If there are files in trash, then we can delete all of the files by clicking the Empty Trash Now button from the top right. Also, if we have a desktop in Linux, then we can check the trash can in Linux to see if that's taking up any extra space. Now to check the available amount of storage from an external device from ChromeOS files, we can first select the external storage from the list on the left. And after that, we can click on the 3-dot menu from the top right. And from here we should see the amount of available storage for the external storage device. Finally, if storage was not the issue for backing up, then what we can do is try shutting down Linux, reboot the Chromebook, and then try backing up Linux again. Now if that fails, then I recommend using the command line method that I will show later in this video. Now to restore from a backup, we can click on the Restore button, then click on the second Restore button to confirm that we want to restore Linux. And from here we can select a .tiny Linux backup file. For my example, I'm going to select the base container backup I just created. After that, we can click on the Open button. From here we can click the notifications from the bottom right to monitor the progress. Again, if the restore appears to be stuck at the last few seconds, then we can click the notifications from the bottom right shelf of our Chromebook twice. And here we should see the new notification that says the restore has been completed. If the restore resulted in an error that is storage related or not very descriptive, then this could be due to a quirk in the ChromeOS Linux restore that usually occurs with larger backups. For this, I recommend restoring a base container, shut down Linux, and then try restoring from the backup you want. If that doesn't work, then you can try increasing the disk size from the Linux development environment settings until the restore is successful. Again, if the Chromebook is lacking storage, you can check the trash from the ChromeOS Files app. Finally, if that doesn't work either, then you can try shutting down Linux, reboot the Chromebook, and then try restoring once more. If the GUI method from Chromebook settings still fails, then we can instead use the command line method from a Crosh terminal. Keep in mind that if the restore fails from the GUI method in settings, Linux will still function normally. Now to backup and restore Linux from the command line, we can first open a Crosh terminal. One way we can open a Crosh terminal is by doing Alt-Control-T on our keyboard. Alternatively, we can open the ChromeOS Chrome browser, then go to chrome-untrusted://Crosh. For my example, I will be using the Crosh terminal that we get from doing Alt-Control-T. Now if we want to, we can clear the Crosh terminal by doing Ctrl-L on our keyboard. In addition to that, we can temporarily increase the font size by doing Ctrl+ on our keyboard. To temporarily decrease the font size in Crosh, we can do Ctrl-. First, I will briefly introduce the overall structure of Linux on a Chromebook from the Crosh terminal. First, we are starting with the ChromeOS command line, which is Crosh. From Crosh, we can first execute vmc-list. This will list the virtual machines, which should include Termina. The Termina virtual machine runs inside of ChromeOS. Now if Termina is already running, then we can go into the virtual machine by executing vsh-termina. Alternatively, we could have also executed vmc-start-termina. From here we can see that we are inside the Termina virtual machine. To exit out of the virtual machine, we can execute exit. To stop the virtual machine, we can execute vmc-stop-termina. After that, we can execute vmc-list again, and this time we should see that Termina is no longer running. Now to start Termina back up, we can execute vmc-start-termina. This will start up Termina, and we will also be inside the virtual machine. Now that we are inside the Termina virtual machine, we will then execute lxc-list. This will list our containers. From here we should see that Penguin is listed. Note that we can have more than one container, which I will be covering more in future videos, along with running Linux from external storage. When those videos are available, I will have them linked in the pinned comment. So Google's custom Debian-based container called Penguin runs inside the Termina virtual machine. Whenever we use Linux, we are inside the Penguin container. Later in this video, I will show how to get into the container as a user and as root. If the Penguin container is stopped, then we can start it by executing lxc-start-penguin. After that, we can do lxc-list again, and this time we should see that the Penguin container is running. To stop the Penguin container, we can execute lxc-stop-penguin. Now lately I have had to force the container to stop. Keep in mind that forcing the container to stop won't break anything, and you can try stopping the container normally first. So if it is stuck at stopping the container, we can cancel it by pressing Ctrl-C on our keyboard 3 times. Then to force the container to stop, we can press the up arrow key on our keyboard to get the previous command we executed. Then at the end of the command, we can add space -- force. Once we've added that, we can press enter to stop the container. After that, we can execute lxc space list, and this time the penguin container should be stopped. Before we get into backing up and restoring from the command line, I am first going to demonstrate navigating through files from the command line. Here I have listed the commands I will be using. pwd will print the file path we are currently in, ls will list files and folders, cd will take us to whatever file path we specify, cd ... will move us up a directory, then we have cd tilde, which will take us to the home directory, and finally we have cd/, which will take us to the root directory. Note that the word directory and folder are used interchangeably in this video. Keep in mind that simply looking around at files will not hurt anything. So first we can execute pwd to print the current directory we are in. Here we can see we are starting in the home directory. Note that the tilde in the command prompt represents the home directory. Now that we know where we are going to execute cd space ... This will move us up one directory. So again, if we execute pwd, we can see the file path we are currently in. Note that the tilde in the command prompt changed so that it now matches the file path we are currently in. After that, we're going to move up a directory again by executing cd space ... Once we've done that, we can execute pwd to print the working directory we are in, and here we can see we are now in the home folder. After that, we are again once more going to execute cd space ... which will move us up another directory. From here we can again execute pwd, and here we can see the file path is just a /, which is often referred to as the root directory. From here we can execute ls to list the files and folders. Now to go back to where we were, we can first execute cd space home to go into the home folder. After that we can do ls to list the files and folders. And from here we are going to go into the Chronos folder by executing cd space Chronos. Once we are in the Chronos folder, we can execute ls again. And here we can see the user folder. So to go into the user folder, we can execute cd space user. After that, we can execute pwd, and here we can see we're back in the home directory. And again, we can see that the command prompt has a tilde, which also means we are in the home directory. Note that rather than going into one folder at a time, we could have also executed cd space /home/chronos/user. Now if we wanted to quickly move to the root directory, we could execute cd space /. After that we can do pwd to print the working directory, and from here we can see that we are back in the root directory. Now to quickly go back to the home directory, we could execute cd space tilde. And again I am executing pwd to print the working directory, and once again we are back to where we started. Now that we know how to look around at files from a terminal, we are now going to navigate to files outside of Linux. In order to access files outside of Linux, we first need to share those files with Linux. To do that, we can open up the ChromeOS Files app. Then from the list on the left side, we can right-click on a folder from the Chromebook or from an external storage device, and select Share with Linux. So here I shared a folder called Video Projects with Linux. We can also share the entirety of an external storage device by right-clicking on the device, and again we can select Share with Linux. For my example, I shared my whole USB storage called Backups with Linux. If we wanted to share all of the files from the Chromebook, we could share my files from the top left instead of sharing individual folders from the Chromebook. Now to manage folders we have shared with Linux, we can right-click on a folder we shared with Linux, and then we can select Manage Linux Sharing. This will take us to Chromebook settings where we can see a list of all the folders and devices we have shared with Linux. Note that if we want to unshare a folder or device, we can click on the X button to the right of the folder or device. Now that we've done all that, I'm going to close out of Chromebook settings, and then I'm going to also close out of the ChromeOS Files app. Now from our Crosh terminal, we can navigate to files outside of Linux. To do that, we can first go to the root directory by executing cd /. After that, we can do ls to list the files and folders from the current directory. Normally, storage that is available from outside of Linux will be in the MNT or media folders. For this example, the files that are shared with Linux will be available in the MNT folder. So we can go into the MNT folder by executing cd /mnt. From here we can again do ls to list the files and folders. Any folders and devices we have shared will be in the shared folder. So to go into the shared folder we can execute cd /shared. Then once again we can execute ls to list the files and folders. Now the My Files folder will contain Chromebook files, and the removable folder will contain external storage devices. For my example, I'm going to go into my external storage device. To do that, I will first execute cd /removable to go into the removable folder. Then from here I'm going to do ls to list the files and folders. And here we can see my external storage device called Backups is listed. Keep in mind the name of your external device will likely differ. Now to go into the external storage device, we can execute cd / the name of the external storage device. After that, we can execute ls to list the files and folders. So here I have a folder called HP Backups where I keep my Linux backups. So to go into my folder, I'm going to execute cd HP Backups . Keep in mind that whenever we refer to a file or folder that contains spaces, it needs to be surrounded in quotes. Now that I am in my folder that contains my Linux backups, I'm going to execute ls to list the files. And here we can see the Linux backups I have stored on my USB stick. So now we know how to access files outside of Linux. Next, I'm going to demonstrate creating and deleting files from a terminal. So here I have listed the commands I will be using. The touch command is for creating a file. The mkdir command will give us the ability to create a folder. The cp command is for copying a file. The mv command is for moving or renaming a file. After that we have the rm command, which we can use for deleting files. And finally, if we use the -r option with the rm command, we can delete a whole folder. So from the terminal, I am first executing cd /... to move up a directory. After that, I'm doing Ctrl-L so it's easier to see what I'm typing. So to create a file, we can execute touch /myfile. This will create a file called myfile. To verify that we have created the file, we can execute ls. From here we can see we did in fact create a file called myfile. Now that we've done that, we're going to create a folder. To create a folder, we can execute mkdir /myfolder. This will create a folder called myfolder. Again, to verify that we created the folder, we can execute ls to list the files and folders. And here we can see the folder called myfolder. Now if we wanted to create a copy of a file, we could execute cp myfile_myfile2. This will create a copy of my file and the copy will be named myfile2. After that, we can execute ls to list the files and folders. And from here we should see the copy of the file we created. Now let's move myfile2 to my folder. To do that, we can execute mv myfile2 myfolder/. This will move myfile2 into my folder. After that, we can execute ls, and from here we can see that myfile2 is no longer listed. So to see the file we moved, we can execute cd space my folder, and then we can execute ls, and here we can see the file we moved into this folder. Keep in mind the mv command is what we also use to rename a file. So to rename the file, we can execute mv space myfile2 space myfile3. This will rename myfile2 to myfile3. Once we've executed that, we can do ls, and here we can see the file has been successfully renamed. Now after that, we can execute cd space ... to move up a directory. Now we are going to delete the original file we created. To do that, we can execute rm space myfile. After we've executed that, we can do ls, and here we can see that my file is no longer there. Now to delete a folder, we can execute rm space -r space my folder. Once we've done that, we can do ls, and here we can see the folder no longer exists. Now that we understand how to move around, create, and delete files, let's back up Linux. To do that, we can navigate to wherever we would like to save the backup, and then we can first execute lxc space list. This will list our containers. Now to back up Linux, we can execute lxc space export space the name of the container, which for this example is Penguin. From here we can wait a few moments for Linux to be backed up. Keep in mind the more files that are in Linux, the longer the backup will take. Since I am only backing up a base container, this will only take a few moments. Once that's done, we can execute ls, and from here we can see our backup is called backup.tar.gz. Now this is the default file name that is used if we don't specify a file name. So if we wanted to set the file name to Penguin, we could execute lxc space export space penguin space penguin. After that's done, we can execute ls to list the files and folders, and this time the backup we created is called Penguin. Finally, if we wanted to have a file name that has good form, we could instead execute lxc space export space penguin.tar.gz. This will name our backup penguin.tar.gz. When that's done, we can execute ls to list the files and folders, and here we can see our penguin.tar.gz backup. So again, having a meaningful name along with the file extension at the end is good form, so we know what the backup is for and what the type of file is. Now to get rid of the extra backups, we can execute rm space backup.tar.gz. After that, we can then execute rm space penguin. Then to verify that we got rid of the extra backups, we can execute ls, and here we can see the extra backups have been deleted. Now, if you are unsure of a backup, you can clone a container from a backup as long as there's enough space on the Chromebook. Keep in mind that if a container is created from the command line, then it also needs to be started from the command line. Here I first did Ctrl-L to clear the terminal so it's easier to see what I'm typing. Now to clone a container from a backup, we can execute lxc space import space the name of the backup file, which for this example is penguin.tar.gz, space the name of the new container, which for this example I will be naming testbird. From here we can wait a few moments for the container to be cloned from the backup. Once the container has been created, we can execute lxc space list to list the containers, and here we should see our new container called testbird. To start up the container, we can execute lxc space start space the container name. Then to go into the container as the user, we can execute lxc space exec space the name of the container space su space dash space the user ID. The user ID should be the user ID from the container. Now when we are in the container, we can execute who am I without any spaces, and this will print out our user ID. To exit out of a container, we can execute exit. After that, to delete a container, we can execute lxc space delete space the container name, which for this example is testbird. Now here we get an error because the container is currently running, so to stop the container, we can execute lxc space stop space the container name. Again, if the container fails to stop the normal way, we can do Ctrl-C on our keyboard 3 times to cancel it. And after that, we can press the up arrow key on our keyboard to get the previous command we executed. And finally, at the end of the command, we can add space dash dash force. Then after the container has been stopped, we can delete it by doing lxc space delete space the container name. Once we have deleted the container, we can execute lxc space list to list the containers. And here we can see that my testbird container has been deleted. Now if we want to restore our backup so it replaces the current penguin container, we can first delete the penguin container. Keep in mind, it is very important that we do not start up Linux normally until we have completed our restore. So to delete the penguin container, we can execute lxc space delete space penguin. Once the container has been deleted, we can execute lxc space import space the name of the backup file space penguin. From here we can wait for the penguin container to be restored. Again, depending on the size of the backup, the restore time may vary. Once penguin has been restored, we can execute lxc space list. From here we should see the penguin container is listed. So now we have successfully backed up and restored Linux from the command line. If we'd like, we can clone a container that we already have on our Chromebook. To do that, we can execute lxc space copy space penguin space the name we would like to give the container. For my example, I will be naming the cloned container testbird. When that's done, we can execute lxc space list, and from here we should see the cloned container, which for my example is testbird. To start the container, we can execute lxc space start space the container name. After that, if we want to go into the container as root, we can execute lxc space exec space the name of the container, which for my example is testbird, space dash dash space bash. Once we've executed that, we will be in the container as root. From here we can navigate to the root directory by executing cd space /. After that, we can execute ls to list the files and folders. Then to figure out the user ID for this container, we can go into the home folder by executing cd space home. After that, we can execute ls. And here we should see the user ID that's used in this container. So if we are unsure of the user ID that's used in a container, then we can go into the container as root, and then we can go to the home folder where we can see the user ID like we did here. Finally, I am going to cover shutting everything down. So if we are running inside of a container, we can exit out of the container by executing exit. Then after that, we can see what containers are running by executing lxc space list. From here we can stop whatever containers are running by executing lxc space stop space the container name. For this example, I stopped the testbird container. After that, we can execute lxc space list to verify that we stopped the container. Then once we have verified the container has been stopped, we can exit out of Termina by executing exit. After that, once we are outside the virtual machine, we can stop the Termina virtual machine by executing vmc space stop space Termina. After that, we can execute vmc space list. Here we should see that Termina is no longer running. Finally, if we opened the Crosh terminal by doing Alt-Control-T, then we can exit out of Crosh by executing exit. Now if we instead opened the Crosh terminal with the ChromeOS Chrome browser, then we can close out of Crosh by simply closing out of the browser. For a fun example of what we can do with cloned containers, I created a Debian and a Kali container. So to start everything up, starting at the Crosh terminal, I will first execute vmc space start space termina. Once termina has started, I'm then going to execute lxc space list. For this example, I have Debian in the Penguin container, and then I have Kali in the Kali container. So first, I'm going to start up the Penguin container by executing lxc space start space penguin. After starting Penguin, I'm going to execute lxc space exec space penguin space su space dash space my user ID, which for this example is Ruth. Now that I'm in the Penguin container, I'm going to start up my desktop by executing goL. Then after a few moments, I have Debian with the LXDE desktop. After that, I'm going to go back to the Crosh app, and then I'm going to exit out of the Penguin container by executing exit. If exiting out of a container appears to be stuck at logout, then we can press enter. So from Termina, I am now going to start the Kali container by executing lxc space start space Kali. Once my Kali container has started, I'm then going to go into the Kali container by executing lxc space exec space Kali space su space dash space my user ID, which for this example is Ruth. Once I'm in my Kali container, I'm then going to start up my desktop by executing gox. If we start up Kali through the Crosh app, it will ask for a password, which we can either ignore it by clicking on the cancel button, or we can enter in a password which we can set from a terminal. So now I also have Kali with the XFCE desktop running on my Chromebook. Here I pressed the 5th key that's to the right of the escape key on my Chromebook keyboard to view all the virtual desktops. Here we can see I am running Debian and Kali at the same time on my Chromebook, and I can easily switch between the two. Finally, for documentation, I have listed the different ways we can get terminal documentation for Crosh, the vmc command, the lxc command, and for bash. It can also be helpful to execute history from a terminal if we want to know the previous commands we've executed. After that, I have listed a few Chromebook-related links for more documentation on ChromeOS and Linux on ChromeOS. All of these links will also be available from the top pinned comment in this video. Companion books to my series of videos are available. I will have those linked in the pinned comment. And that's all for this video, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon!